flights and the flights out of other airports are just too expensive right now. So as if the weather delays and these technology issues we've been talking about this week are not bad enough, on Saturday, wireless companies will power up their 5G service, and some aviation experts are now warning that could interfere with airline communications.
Yeah, we know that this plan has been a long time coming, and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has warned airlines to be ready for this upgrade. But now the question is, are they ready? We are joined now by Hugh Odom, the founder and president of Vertical Consultants, which is a cell tower consulting firm. Hugh, you're the perfect guy for this because we really would love for you to break this down in layman's terms. Make it so that we can all understand what exactly is 5G and how so is it going to be interfering with flights and pilots?
Well, the quick explanation is 5G is an upgraded service from what you currently have, and it's on a frequency called C-band. And C-band is broken up in, let's say, different lanes. And the lane that 5G is traveling on is very close to the lane that the altimeters that planes use. An altimeter is an instrument that helps with the descent on a landing that tells what the altitude is going to be as they go down. And what the concern with the FAA and the airlines and the wireless industry and the FCC has always been for the last 2 years is there's possible interference. Those lanes are really close, and there may be some, divergence over into the lanes as they get closer to airports, the planes that is. And so what the issue comes into play is that right now we still have about 20% of all domestic planes out there have been retrofitted to prevent this possible interference. And 35% of international planes coming across have also the same issue. So starting July 1st, as you mentioned, AT&T and Verizon ramp up their service around the airports, and that could cause possible delays and rerouting of planes and possible cancellations as well.
Now, I got to ask you, Hugh, call me crazy, but you look at the calendar, and if you have anything to do with aviation, you see the July 4th weekend, and you think, okay, we're going to have an increased travel period. I know this has been delayed before. Why now? Especially, obviously we had all this, the mess that we're dealing with right now earlier this week. But why on the 4th of July weekend are we rolling this thing out?
I have no idea. I actually flew out. We're based in Nashville. I actually flew out to Denver yesterday to get ahead of it, to be honest with you, because I was concerned that there's going to be a possible issue coming out. And it is a weird date to pick, one of the busiest travel weekends before one of the busiest holidays. But it's been a date that's been set for several months now. And as you mentioned earlier, Pete Buttigieg, Department of Transportation head, he had set this date several months ago, right around the first of the year, and they're going to hold firm to it. And they're saying to the airlines, you better be up to speed, or we're just going to let the chips fall where they may and deal with the issues that come about.
Now, Hugh, you hit us with some numbers, the percentages of those domestic flights and international flights that still have yet to make those necessary upgrades. What is the reason for all these delays? Is it a supply chain issue?
Well, that's what the FAA and more particularly the airlines are saying. They've had supply chain issues for the last year or so. But let's put this in perspective. This all started over 2+ years ago, almost 2.5 years ago. And the issue was back and forth, and they just kicked the can down the road. And they've had more than enough time to figure out what the issue is and also get the equipment in place. It's just a situation by which everybody was pointing fingers at each other, from the airlines to the wireless carriers to the FAA to the FCC. And who's going to pay the price? The passengers going across the country who are maybe delayed or rerouted to another airport that causes longer flights for them to get from point to point.
I'm thinking about this, and you just maybe glass half full thinking here, and you hope that there's not a major impact, especially with what we're seeing already this week with something separate. But Hugh, I got to ask, is there a chance, what are the chances of this being like a Y2K thing, where we're all worried about something huge may happen, and then it finally goes into effect, and there really isn't an impact? What is the level of possibility that this turns out to be really not a big deal?
Well, let's break it down really quickly. As I mentioned, about 20% of the total planes out there have this retrofitting still need to be done. Now, again, this basically only comes into play, the altimeter, when you're flying into bad weather, foggy conditions, things like that. So that lessens the odds as well. But you're talking about a very important piece of equipment, especially if you're flying in bad weather or foggy conditions. So it's not so much it's going to be a widespread situation. It could basically snowball with regards to having to reroute these planes because of this issue. And it's, again, something that could have been prevented.
And cause a system-wide ground stoppage, which we do not need with what we're dealing with already added to the load. So thank you so much, Hugh Odom, for joining us this morning.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, Hugh was talking about